So I accidentally grabbed someone else's water bottle, took a big swig, and almost vomited because it just tasted awful. And it turned out my teammate was soda loading. And so his water bottle was full of baking soda. And so that was awful. I almost threw up. But then the denouement of the story was later that year at the conference championships. I was the alternate for the 4x800 meter relay. But my team, and at the conference championships, we were running multiple races over the course of a couple of days. My teammate soda loaded for like 4 consecutive races, and by the time we got to the 4x800, he was in the bathroom with explosive diarrhea because he had soda loaded multiple times. So I got the call up, had one of the greatest races of my life, made and got earned my spot on the team and got to go to nationals for the first time because my teammate put himself out of commission with baking soda.
Wow, what a story. Yeah, you just have to know that tipping point of when how much is too much, right?
The 4th time in 2 days, that was too much. That was definitely too much.
And diarrhea can actually be fantastic. Look at it.
Who says that? Fantastic. Well, yes, yeah.
It got me my big break. What can I say?
Big break.
Poop again! He called the shit poop! This is the best night of my life.
I'm Alex Hutchinson, and I am a renegade.
Renegade is what happens when 2 ordinary friends dare to practice the lost art of conversation to better understand what it means to be a runner, a human. Should we follow convention and play by the rules, or would it be better to trust our guts? Each episode, you'll learn from the experts, the underdogs, the elites and non-elites, those doing big things, all in that curious quest of being just a little bit better tomorrow. In a world of runners, be a renegade.
Or wit friends or Wit's Peak. There's an athletic brew for you. Oh, it's a bit of a stretch, but they are tasty.
Well, today we got Alex Hutchinson joining us, Mark. We know him from his best-selling book, Endure. We know him from his column on OutsideOnline.com, his Sweat Science column. And we love him for being super patient and the patience he displays when breaking down the science, what the data is saying to jokers like us.
My physics game is really, really weak, and I know that that's part of his background as well. So taking anything complicated and breaking it down to something I can understand is something that I very much appreciate. So, Alex, thank you in advance.
Both appreciate it. And, our last episode, he joined us for episode 8. I was looking back, episode 8, and we did a little intro, and this still rings true. There are many things that our Garmins cannot tell you. And luckily for many things, we have Alex Hutchinson, famous Malcolm Gladwell quote. And we appreciate Alex joining us today.
That's right. No, I'm looking forward to this conversation. He's got so many articles that I was just combing through. I want to talk to him about beet juice. Can my watch estimate my VO2 max accurately? My VO2 max right now is 53. I have no idea if that's good or bad. But
I'll pause here for a second, Mark. He can explain to us what VO2 max actually is, because I don't even know what it is. My watch tells it to me too. I have no idea.
No, I don't.
But what is yours again?
53.
Holy crap. You're really good.
I'm not, though. So something's broken. Maybe my wrist isn't thick enough for it to read accurately or something. I don't know.
That's because you're out hammering every day. That's what it is.
No, today was a slow one. I got out for the first time in a while, so it was good. A nice little, I think it was like 1 or 2 degrees this morning, Celsius here in the region. So it was good. It's good. Not a lot of sweat. Nice and easy. But yeah, and there's probably a million other functions on this thing that I don't know how to use, but it looks cool.
Well, that's 99% of running, Mark, is looking cool. That's for sure. but I wouldn't know.
To the 20th episode of the Renegade Podcast. I am your co-host, Runkle Mark, and with me again today, as always, is
It's Todd.
Great. And today we have Alex Hutchinson. So, Alex, thanks again for joining us. You were on our 8th episode. You're back for our 20th. We love your articles. We love anything that you've written. We soak it up, and we are very interested in asking you a little bit more about what you've written about recently, some of the things that you have coming up over the next few months, and really just what we can do to continue to strive for continuous improvement. For that, Todd, I'll let you drop the first question for Alex, because I know you always have great ones. Pressure's on.
We'll have them. No pressure here. But you know what, Alex? We went back to Outside Online, your Sweat Science column, and we look back from May, June timeframe till now, and you got some really great articles. And along with those lines, there's been some great athletic performances this summer that we'd like to get your thoughts on. The Olympics, stuff that's perked your interest in the endurance world. But you know, the first article that really perked Mark and I's interest here was June 6th, 2024. Why you, Mark, you were born to run. And for the most runners, we've found running and read all those great books, Born to Run and whatnot. And this article deals with persistence hunting. So what did you find that brings us back to, are humans born and designed to run?
Yeah, you may have thought you'd stumbled on an article from 2009 or something like that, because we had a lot of discussions about persistence hunting and how the body was shaped to run around that time, around when Chris McDougall's book came out. Even that was drawing on a 2004 paper by some scientists who made the case that actually a lot of different aspects of our body are shaped as if we were designed to be good ultra long distance runners, to be able to go for hour after hour and chase down, antelopes on the savannah or whatever. So that this idea has been out there for a long time, right? So not fresh. What's fresh? Well, there's a new study that digs into the evidence, basically asks the question, how common was this persistence running thing? Because there have been, in the wake of, or supporting this original scientific hypothesis was like, we know a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy who went to Botswana and saw someone chase an animal to exhaustion, some sort of antelope to exhaustion. So we know it's possible. And there's a big leap from that to saying, okay, it's possible humans can chase an animal to exhaustion, to this completely shaped our modern bodies and our minds too, that we want to run long distances. So this rare, unusual trait, it's a big stretch to say that this is actually something that quote unquote makes us human. And in fact, it just seems like such a improbable thing, because running is so expensive energetically. If you have the choice between running somewhere and walking somewhere, you're going to spend more energy if you run there, and energy is the currency that keeps us alive. And so there are a bunch of these critiques. And also, we didn't just live on the African savannah. Like, were we hunting animals to exhaustion, around the North Pole and in the mountains and all the different places that people live. And so what some researchers did was look back and collect all the sort of first contact reports they could find from around the world, I think it was about the 1500s through to the early 1900s, where there's a lot of like missionary stuff and explorers and any sort of accounts of people who were living in their traditional, or populations that were living in their traditional way, as yet relatively undisturbed. And they fed them into a giant kind of text analysis software where they could use artificial intelligence and machine learning to look, or I don't know if it wasn't like ChatGPT or anything like that, but basically there are all these books that people have read, people have studied, but they may not have read with an eye to like, is there any evidence that people were doing persistence hunting? So they did sort of proximity searches. Are there places where like tired hunt, animal, fall all appear in the same paragraph or whatever? And the answer is that there were, like, I can't remember the exact number. There were hundreds and hundreds of instances of persistence hunting recorded in this contact literature all around the world. So we're talking like in the deep snows of Newfoundland, in the mountains of California, on islands in the Indian Ocean, people hunting goats to exhaustion, hunting moose to exhaustion. And so I guess I'm rambling here, but to cut to the chase, it really supports this idea that persistence hunting, running for long periods of time until an animal falls over, was something that all sorts of human populations did all around the globe in different conditions, whenever there was a situation where humans could put the conditions to their advantage. So in the savannah, it might be that it was so hot that humans, since most of us don't have hair, and some of us like Todd and myself have even less hair than most people, that they could take advantage of their greater heat dissipation abilities. In Newfoundland, it might be you wait until a day when there's crusty snow, where there's the kind of like crust on top of the snow where animals are going to break through, so they have a hard time running. Humans can use snowshoes, and so they can go across top of the snow and use their superior advantage to hunt animals to exhaustion. But by and large, the evidence suggests that yes, we were built to run long distances.
See, Mark, you were born to run.
So get out there.
Get out there. And you know what? I will take that advice, and I will continue to get out there and run myself to exhaustion each morning as I finish my 5K.
Mark.
It's the squirrels and the raccoons these days. They're very hard to run to exhaustion.
That's so true. Go ahead, Todd.
What kind of threw a loop in when I read that article in my brain is that you commented, the research shows the faster you go, the more rewarding the hunt is, which would have been counter. You would have thought, persistence hunting, track the animal slowly and stalk it. And because you think if you're running, you're going to expel a lot of energy, but actually it was better to run fast, get the kill, and then get back to camp. That's what I took away from it, maybe, or did I get that totally wrong?
Yeah, no, that's another dimension of this study. They did this sort of cost-benefit analysis for different kinds of hunting. So not just for persistence hunting, but for also I think they called it like opportunistic hunting, and maybe there were different categories of hunting, like when you get a whole bunch of people to go out and try and like trap something, or when you're just going out there like sitting in your deer blind and waiting for a deer to walk by or whatever. And so it's true, as I said at the top, that running is more energetically expensive than walking. But the thing is, if you run or mix a little bit of jogging and running or whatever that the sustainable pace is, you're going to catch up with the animal much sooner. And so when they run these calculations, as Todd said, if you want to burn the fewest amount of calories in order to catch this big source of calories, actually mixing in some running turns out to make the hunt more efficient, because then you catch the animal sooner, so you cover a shorter distance overall, even though you're burning more calories quickly. And so when you look at the reward, the return on investment of how many calories you put out to how many calories you get in, persistence hunting turns out to be comparable, and in a lot of cases better than these other forms of hunting, even heading out with a bow and arrow, or whatever. So that, these calculations are obviously a little bit imprecise, but they support the idea that before the dawn of high-powered rifles and things like that, persistent hunting was actually not just possible, but it was, so because another critique was like, people like the Tarahumara, they do persistence hunting, but it's kind of ceremonial. They do it as a kind of special, rite of passage. It's not an efficient way to get food, but they do it because it feels pretty cool to run down an animal, and maybe it's, passage to manhood or whatever. But it's like, no, actually these calculations suggest that this was a good way to fill the refrigerator for a lot of populations in a lot of contexts, that it was actually an efficient way of spending your energy is to run down these animals.
That's interesting. Then I'm thinking, the farther you go, though, the farther you have to bring it back. Right?
Yeah, so. And it's not light too. You're hauling a big animal. So, but I would say in the modern context, it's more efficient to go to the supermarket. But this is when your options were somewhat limited. It was still a good way of doing it.
That's great. Well, that's something I'll make sure I talk to my brother-in-law about when he talks about going out to the blind the next time. I'm just kidding. He's into all types with the crossbow and everything. So I haven't had a chance to go along with him yet. But so another article that you had written that actually really piqued my interest because my father-in-law was getting into it quite a bit was beet juice. So what's with the beet juice? Is it really a miracle food that's not only going to help me improve my running, but also my cognitive ability, which I also need help with?
Yeah, beet juice. It's interesting. Let me answer this the long way by giving a little bit of my trajectory. Sure. I think it was around 2009. The first studies in like the Journal of Applied Physiology, so some pretty legit journals, came out saying beet juice could boost endurance. And I actually wrote an article at that time making fun of this, saying like yet another in the long list of, stupid supplement ideas. Like, yeah, it's beet juice. Sure. We're all going to be drinking beet juice to run a marathon. Yeah, that sounds plausible. And then a couple of years later, it's like everybody was drinking beet juice, including Olympic marathoners. And we were getting interviews about, articles about where like Paula Radcliffe, at the time, the world record holder for the marathon, was saying, yeah, it gives me diarrhea and I have to, your poop turns purple and all. It's like, wow, we're really, getting a lot of information about the beet juice.
Right in the details.
And so a bunch of studies came out showing pretty convincingly, like well-designed studies, properly blinded with good placebo controls and everything. Like it was testing beet juice versus this exact same beet juice, just with the nitrates removed. The nitrates are the key ingredient. And you'd find that the full beet juice, basically it made running more efficient. Your muscles would use a little bit less oxygen to produce the same, to run at the same speed. And so if your fuel economy is better, you can run farther or faster for longer. And so that for a while was the slam dunk case, and every serious marathoner was taking beet juice. And I can say I tried beet juice shots once just to see what it was like. And I was locked in the porta potty right up until the start of the race. It's like, so it's not like a risk-free intervention. No. You want to try it in training. But then the kind of, there's always a backlash to the backlash to the backlash. And the critique then became that it works for the average Joe, but maybe not at the elite level, that the elites are so finely tuned already, so well adapted that there's just no more headroom, that they don't get much benefit. And actually, I was just reading in the last couple of days, I was reading a new textbook that's out it's called, I think it's like Nutrition and Supplements for Cycling or something like that. It has chapters on all the main possibilities, things you could supplement for cycling. And so they have a chapter on beet juice written by some of the main researchers in that field, summing up the current state of knowledge. And that's pretty much where it still stands, is that beet juice does appear to have real effects. If you're at the Olympics, it may be that you're already such a fine specimen that beet juice won't do much, or it may be that you need twice as much beet juice. There's also some evidence suggesting that, that well-trained athletes just need more beet juice to see an effect. But yeah, I would say it's legit. Whether it's the right thing to do for anybody, for any given person at any given time, might depend on how strong their stomach is and like how much they're willing. I certainly remember, maybe it was about 2010, 11, Reed Coolsat, the great Canadian marathoner. He took a really good crack at the Canadian marathon record at the Scotiabank Toronto Waterfront Marathon. He didn't miss it by much, 30 seconds or something like that. And that included a porta potty stop halfway through the race.
Wow. Okay. So what I heard from that then is, because I'm non-elite, there is a chance it's going to work for me. I didn't want to insult you by saying, but yeah, you're the guy. Pack some extra toilet paper in that pack, but. Yeah, well, my current route goes through a cemetery, and there's always a porta potty there too. So I'll just have to somehow, stomach having it first thing in the morning, I guess. It's not really
Yeah.
the first
And
thing you
beets,
think about.
like the jars of beets, you have to like have a good holder. So when you're when you're trying
If
to
they're made out of glass,
that's a
you
really
gotta be
good video.
And just
You're all stained.
look, just if to get into the practical side, not all beets are created equally or created equal. Not all beet juice is created equal. If you're really going for it in a performance way, there's some that are like there's a product. I'm not affiliated with any products, but there's a product called Beet It, which is basically. Yes, very, but they
Hear
make
Michael Jackson playing in the background.
that's right. I'm sure the licensing fees would be totally reasonable. But they make products, juice and bars and shots with a known, like more or less guaranteed amount of nitrate in it, because the amount of nitrate in beets can vary quite a lot. And if you, for example, I think if you boil the beets, you will lose a lot of the nitrate content. I'm not sure about like pickled beets and stuff like that. I think roast, like just oven baked or roasted beets, is a good way to go to preserve the, like. There's a whole nother set of like beet things that what the nitrate in beet does is it ends up getting converted into nitric oxide, which is crucial to how your blood vessels operate, how well they dilate and contract in response to when you're trying to pump more blood through them. You want them to widen, and when you're not pumping blood through them, you want them to squeeze down. Nitric oxide does that. That's good for your health too. It's good for your blood pressure. So there's actually evidence that beet juice can be taking regular beet juice can lower your blood pressure. There's some pretty reasonable evidence for that. So what I've taken from it is I took that beet shot once and I was like, yeah, I don't want that in my stomach anymore when I run. But I've definitely, over the last 10 years, I've tried to make beets a regular part of my diet. I find if you decent beets and you roast them, they're actually really delicious. And I think they're a really healthy part. Nitrate, the other things that have nitrate are like leafy greens like arugula and spinach. So it's like, these are things that are super healthy, and I like beets better than I like spinach. But yeah, I don't boil them. I roast them, and I think, and it's like, if you just go to the store and get like Minute Maid beet juice, I don't know if Minute Maid sells beet juice, but let's say they did, I wouldn't necessarily be confident that I was getting the same benefits. And so then you're drinking beet juice, which might taste funny, and you're not really getting anything out of it. So just a note of caution on that.
No, that's really helped. So, and never in a million years did I think about, hopping on a running podcast that I'd be able to get this deep into beet talk. So thank you. Thanks, Alex.
Right into the science of beets. Hey, Renegades. We have an excellent friend of the podcast, Path Projects. Founded in 2018, they're focused on functional designs, innovative materials, and apparel that looks great in the city, and gear that excels on the most grueling of trails. They offer a complete range of technical gear and running apparel for today's modern endurance athletes, and they're constantly innovating. New in 2024, they brought us their Graves PX Shell running jacket, water resistant. It's got a great cut. It's breathable. They brought us a whole new line of technical tees with their Tensolite T19 material. It's jersey-like. It's soft material, the perfect fit, and it performs. They brought us their Wadi collection, ultra-light UV protection, performance with UV protection. It's fantastic. They offer a tank, a tee, and a hoodie. And now, their Montera collection, offering a jogger and a hoodie. These are all-day sweats with serious performance chops, ultra soft 4-way stretch fleece material, allowing you to smoothly transition from daily wear to your cool weather runs. And for our Renegade listeners, use the code RENEGADE10 for 10% off your order for a limited time. Well, along those lines, another kitchen staple, you had this article, was sodium bicarbonate, baking soda. And this has been reinvigorated. Folks have now been fueling with the Marentette gels that have bicarbonate into it, and they're getting extraordinary performances or performance boosts. Is it the same science, Alex, or is it a different mechanism that sodium bicarbonate gives us runners?
So baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, better known as baking soda, it's in everyone's kitchen. It's been around as a performance enhancer for a long time. Actually, the very first studies were back in the 1930s, and the first performance-related studies were in the 80s. When I was in university in the 1990s, using baking soda for racing was actually banned by the anti-doping authorities.
Oh, seriously?
And you can't ban baking soda, right? Like you can't ban muffins, but it was what's known as a banned technique. So soda loading, taking a whole bunch of soda right before a race was illegal, which didn't stop people from doing it. What stopped people from doing it was that for a lot of people, it gave them explosive diarrhea. So, what you gain on one end, you lose on the other end, so to speak. You get 1% faster, but 20% faster going to the bathroom, or 200%. So it's been around for a long time. The basic idea is baking soda is a base. So it counteracts the rising acidity during intense exercise. The way we would have explained it in the 90s, the way it was explained to me was like, if you run hard, you get a bunch of lactic acid. Baking soda counteracts the lactic acid. It turns out the physiology is a little more nuanced than that you don't have lactic acid in your blood. You have lactate, and it's dissociated from the hydrogen ion. And the hydrogen ion is what's associated with the changing acidity. But whatever, like the upshot is essentially the same. Your blood is getting more acidic, and that's compromising your muscle contractions. Baking soda is a way of just kind of keeping that under control, and it's particularly effective for hard exercise lasting between 1 and 10 minutes, 1 and 20 minutes. But in recent years, people have realized actually it might be useful for much longer exercise. So a lot of ultra runners, like Kilian Jornet, has been taking it for a long time. He feels it has a lot of different benefits, but one is just that if you're out on the trails, if you're running an ultra, you're not just like going around and around the track at a constant speed. You're going down, and then you're going up steep hills. And when you're going up steep hills, you're going anaerobic sometimes, even during very long races. And the baking soda is going to help you tolerate those or get through those intense parts where you're having to push a little harder. So the idea that baking soda helps, well established. What's changed in the last couple of years is, Todd, as you said, a new product from Morton. They're sort of most famous for their carbohydrate drink, which is a hydrogel it's supposed to be easy on your stomach because it gets turned into a hydrogel and lets it get ingested more easily. They're doing the same thing with baking soda. It's a little more complicated. They call it the system, and I can't even remember all the details. You take a bunch of little micro pills and put them into two other components that mix to form the hydrogel, and it looks like you're just slurping down soup. And then these micro pills get taken through with the hydrogel into your intestine, where they get absorbed rather than in your stomach, where they give you diarrhea. Is my basic understanding of it. There's been a little bit of research that suggests that you can take Morton, a similar dose of bicarbonate, raise your circulating levels of bicarbonate without getting the gastrointestinal problems. Let's say 1 or 2 studies that offer some good evidence of that, but a lot of anecdotal evidence from athletes basically saying, hey, I can take baking soda, because people have been using baking soda consistently for the last few decades, but it's always been like experimenting, and only a few people could tolerate it. Some people couldn't. Now everyone's taking it. Most famous as a Canadian, the big example from the Olympics was Marco Arop, the 800-meter runner who ran one of the greatest 800s in history and just happened to get beat by 1 or 2 hundredths of a second. I can't remember which for the gold medal. But he sort of kept hearing that everybody was taking this new Morton baking soda. So like a week before the Olympics, he asked his agent, he's like, can you get me some of that baking soda stuff? And so he tried it just literally for the first time in the week before the Olympics. And then he went and ran this amazing 1:41 race to come second, his best race by well over a second. And there've been a lot of stories like that so a lot of people running fast in a lot of different distances. A lot of speculation about what, is it the new shoes? Is it drugs? But one of the ingredients in that, or one of the elements in that conversation is it the baking soda? Because it sounds like everybody is taking the baking soda now. They can tolerate it. And it does have, reasonably well supported evidence for performance enhancement.
You mentioned it looks like soup when you take it down. I'm envisioning, remember Orbits from back in the 90s? It was like a drink that had the little gels within it that was kind of suspended in there.
I do not remember that.
No,
wow.
you don't remember.
How did I miss that?
I don't remember that.
We'll put in the show notes maybe a picture of me consuming one from back in the day.
Superimpose some video of that. I'd love to see that.
Well, I'm just thinking like back when it was banned. I mean, what the kids simply do is go around each person with like a spoonful of vinegar and see how their stomach would react to that.
Look, my story from that era is that I was at an indoor track meet, and famously, so indoor tracks are very dry. So when you race indoors for the first time in a season, you inevitably end up with this awful track hack right after the race because your breathing tubes are just absolutely stripped. So I raced my first indoor race of the year and was just hacking up a lung, and went to grab my water bottle to soothe myself. And my university team had just been issued our greatest perk of the year, which was free water bottles, 50-cent plastic water bottles. So we all had identical water bottles. So I accidentally grabbed someone else's water bottle, took a big swig, and almost vomited because it just tasted awful. And it turned out my teammate was soda loading. And so his water bottle was full of baking soda. And so that was awful. I almost threw up. But then the denouement of the story was later that year at the conference championships. I was the alternate for the 4x800 meter relay. But my team, and at the conference championships, we were running multiple races over the course of a couple of days. My teammate soda loaded for like 4 consecutive races. And by the time we got to the 4x800, he was in the bathroom with explosive diarrhea because he had soda loaded multiple times. So I got the call up, had one of the greatest races of my life, made and earned my spot on the team and got to go to nationals for the first time, because my teammate put himself out of commission with baking soda.
Wow, what a story. Yeah, you just have to know that tipping point of when how much is too much, right?
The 4th time in 2 days, that was too much. That was definitely too much.
And diarrhea can actually be fantastic. Look at it.
Who says that? Fantastic. Well, yes, yeah.
It got me my big break. What can I say?
We got Alex's big break. Well, there is so much advancement on the fueling front with these, whether it's Beets or baking soda. And we saw these feats over the summertime where athletes are really pushing up the amount of carbohydrates that they're actually taking in per hour, especially runners. I guess this is more well known for cyclists. They'll push their carbohydrate levels a lot higher. But I always heard that maybe like 60 to 90 grams per hour was about as much as a runner could actually take in. And then we've been hearing feats where runners are fueling 120, 150 grams of carbohydrates per hour. What's your take on that, Alex?
Yeah, so, I mean, let's start with a little historical context, just because that's what I do. Until about, 10, 15 years ago, the thought was 60 grams was about the max that you could take in. And that's simply because you have to, you have transporters in your gut that move the carbohydrate from your gut into the bloodstream. And that you have people have a typical density of transporters, and they can't get more than about 60 grams an hour from the gut to the bloodstream. And you try and give people 90 grams or 80 grams or whatever, and they're still just absorbing the same amount, and the rest is being, excreted or disposed of otherwise. And so that's what all the sports nutrition texts said, is 60 grams an hour. About 15 years ago, let's say, research started to emerge saying that, okay, that's true that you could, if you're taking glucose, you can only get 60 grams an hour. But we have other kinds of transporters. There's another set of transporters in the gut that can work in parallel to these glucose transporters. And so if you take a mix of glucose and fructose, say, or 2 different kinds of, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of carbohydrate, but let's say glucose and fructose. The glucose will go through one transporter, the fructose will go through another transporter, and that other second transporter is maybe half as efficient. So if you take a 2-to-1 ratio of glucose to fructose, you can get up to 90 grams an hour. So around 2010, 2011, sports nutrition guidelines started to be rewritten to say 60 to 90 grams an hour. And that's actually still where I would say the official guidelines sit. The thing is, there's more to it than just what your transporters can do. And so the big difference between cycling and running is that in running, you're jostling your stomach around with every step and shaking stuff up. And so people tend to have a lot more gastrointestinal upset in running than they do in cycling. Cyclists can eat, solid food on the bike. They'll be eating rice or whatever during long rides or various other things. Runners tend to have trouble. I mean, ultra runners, obviously, they've had to learn to eat solid food in a lot of cases, just because when you're out there that long, you can't, only so many gels you can eat. But it's a challenge, right? Like that, for a lot of ultra runners, getting the nutrition right it's really hard figuring out what you can get down and keep down if you're going to be out there for a long time. And so to say, go from, your theoretical limit has gone from 60 to 90 grams, they may be saying, well, the hell with that. And like, I have trouble keeping down 50 grams or 30 grams. Like people don't tend to eat to max out on the limits because it just doesn't feel good long before they're hitting these metabolic limits. So it's in that context that we started to hear about cyclists taking 120 grams, probably 4 years ago or so. I mean, people may have been doing it before, but you started to hear stories of like really good cyclists taking that much. And part of it was, they've switched the ratio again. Instead of 2-to-1 ratio of carbs, it's now like 1 to 0.8, and they're trying different ways of making it a little easier to digest. Part of it is just, I think, training the gut. The gut, you can actually, if you force the gut to deal with that much carbohydrate, you get better at being able to tolerate it without getting sick. And you're actually, I think there's some evidence that the density of transporters in your gut can increase, so you're able to get across a little more. So cyclists have been doing it. Ultra runners have been doing it. Kilian Jornet, he was very open with his like data and approach. He'll tailor, he won't just go out there and take 120 grams an hour for an entire ultra. But for the parts where he's planning to push, whether it's where the terrain is particularly uphill, or maybe he's planning to make a big move, at points when he's burning a lot of energy, he'll take as much as 120 grams an hour. And then, at Leadville this year, David Roach set a course record. He was very open about his approach. He gave a lot of details about what he was doing, what he felt the keys were to his success. And one of the things he said is like, he feels one of his genetic gifts is that he's really good at eating carbohydrate and digesting carbohydrate without puking it up. And so he's taking these sorts of high levels. And so, yeah, it's a relatively new thing. And it's something that, a few years ago, I would have said, don't be crazy. Don't waste your time taking 120 grams. No one can do that. But obviously that's not the case.
Well, actually, back in the 2000-2001 era, there's an unstudied case that was occurring of this high school football team that used to go to Pizza Hut before big games and carb load.
All you can eat buffet?
All you could eat. And I can remember many of these games where you end up having a stomach ache and you're not really moving as fast, and didn't necessarily contribute to any wins there, but definitely carb loading, but without the science behind it. So
yeah, we had this situation. We would go to big meets, and I was a guy who almost never went out to dinner. Like going out to dinner was a big treat for me, and so we would pick carefully where we would eat the night before dinner. And we knew a couple of places where we would race, there'd be like an all-you-can-eat buffet. And it's like, well, if I'm paying for this food, I'm going to get my money's worth. So I would go to bed the night before big races, national championships. I would go to bed just with this awful stomach ache because I'd been like, I'm getting my $12.95 worth of this pasta, whether it kills me. And it took me a long time to sort of understand that, more isn't always better. That there's a sweet spot. There's a golden mean.
More isn't always better. Going back to Dave Roach for a second, like he's been completely open. He's been on his podcast. He's been on other podcasts. And one cool thing, like a nugget that he gave to everybody was what he said that the ability to take that much carbohydrates in he just skipped the tongue. So he opened up the pack and he put the gel back on his palate and into his gut. And he practiced that. And then maybe you're bypassing something about the tongue, giving like a visceral reaction that I can't take anymore. And he said once he figured that out, he could take as many as he wanted, and it never upset his stomach.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, there are studies, very famous studies about like rinsing your mouth and spitting out sports drink, where it's like you get a performance by swishing it around and spitting it out. And that indicates that there are sensors in your mouth that detect when fuel is coming in. And so in effect, what it sounds like he's doing is bypassing those sensors. So the body has like multiple overlapping ways of detecting, how much energy you have. So it's not like your body is completely oblivious to the energy coming in, but one of those sort of alarm systems is in your mouth. And so skipping that is going to sort of downregulate whatever response you have. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And of course it works with gels. Don't try that with like chicken wings or anything like that.
Chicken wings for sure.
Some people do that with boat races. Yeah. So,
when Alex was talking about training the gut, my mind went back. We had Corey Belmore on a few months ago, and he's the beer mile record holder. He's from Windsor, Ontario. He's a friend of ours. And he talked about his training when he was young, and why he's a good beer miler is his parents would be late to get into practice. So he had to hurry up and eat dinner and then go to track practice. So he always had a full gut running track workouts. And he thinks that's one of the key traits to make him a really good beer miler.
Well, I was thinking maybe he learned to pour the beer down his throat without it touching his tongue. But
well, he did talk about that. Yeah,
no, but I've always been comfortable running with a full stomach for whatever reason. My wife doesn't like that. And so, as we have young kids now who are, starting to negotiate this idea of like, oh, I have a soccer game or I have to exercise. Should I eat right before? Oh, I don't want to eat right before. And I'm like, just eat, like you'll be fine. And you'll learn to be fine too. It's definitely a learned thing. And I can remember showing up at workouts sometimes, I can remember one particular workout where I was meeting a friend of mine for hard intervals. And as we got there, I was like, oh, I just need to find a garbage can for this like McDonald's bag. And he's like, what do you mean McDonald's bag? Yeah, I was a little hungry on the way here. So I stopped and got 2 Big Macs and ate them. And he's like, are you crazy? You can't like eat 2 Big Macs and then step off the subway. And I'm like, oh yeah, no problem. It never occurred to me that it would be a problem. And I don't know how much of it is just, that's the way my stomach worked, and how much of it is just that for as long as I can remember, I didn't worry about it. And so I learned to, I think there's definitely a part of you learn to be used to the feeling of running with a full stomach, and it just stops bothering you.
That was your special sauce, right? That's
yeah. I will say this was a long time ago. I don't eat 2 Big Macs on the way to work out anymore, but it did happen.
Yeah, I don't know if I could stomach 2, just even on a day where I was not running or doing anything physical in the afternoon. But I mean, I know you're expelling a lot of
when you're 19 years old, a lot of things can
do
happen.
A lot of things. That's right. So kind of a reoccurring segment that we have now on our podcast, since now we're 20 in, is really honing in on the foot, because Todd's most famous question ever asked to our friend Dr. Cucuzella was, why is the foot so important? Now, what I'm trying to get to is, have there been any advancements in the foot over the last 8 months since we last chatted? Or actually, I was listening to Trail Runner Nation when you were on back in, I think, was it March? Or anyway,
sometime.
Foot dome. Is that something that we can share with our listeners as to what is it foot doming? Foot doming
is a thing. This is an idea that's been around for a while. You could connect it to the whole barefoot thing from, let's say, again, 2009, just like the persistence hunting.
Yeah.
And you could say, what do we take from that whole experience? Is it that people shouldn't run in shoes? Maybe, or shouldn't run in cushioned shoes? Well, that doesn't seem to have persisted. But should we take the lesson that people should have strong feet? yeah, I think that's a pretty good lesson. And that's, I think, one of the big benefits from people who do run in more minimalist shoes or no shoes or whatever, is they end up with very strong feet. And so if you can get through that transition period, you have an advantage in terms of, as I'm sure Mark Cucuzella would have told you, like, if you hit the ground right, if you're controlling your impact with your feet, that's going to affect the whole rest of your body. So it's going to have an impact on the load on your knees and your hips and all these other things. So there's been a lot of as it turned out that a large fraction of the population did want to run with shoes. There's been a lot of interest in trying to figure out, okay, are there other ways that we can promote strong feet that absorb impact and provide propulsion? And so one idea that was proposed is to think about a kind of foot core in the same way we have a core in our abdomen that provides stability for the upper body. If you have a foot core, the core of the foot, and I can't remember, there's 11 muscles or 17 muscles or some large number of independent muscles in the foot, a lot of which are completely dormant. If you're just locking it in a big cushion running shoe, you're not using them. And so then if you get pushed a little off center or something, these muscles are not strong to be able to stabilize you or keep you upright or whatever. And so foot doming, so with that long roundabout introduction to get back to your actual question, foot doming is basically, how do you describe it without visual aids? But it's kind of
Todd,
like,
can you show us your? Just kidding.
Well, we can show our hand. Pretend and you have to dome you push that big toe in the ground, right? And you kind of like.
Yeah, the way I sometimes think of it is like if you had a towel on the ground and you're trying to use your toe. So there's a classic exercise for plantar fasciitis, where it's like there's a towel on the ground and you use your big toe to pull it towards you, and that gets your foot into the dome position. Foot doming, I think, is kind of sustaining that arched or domed posture and trying to build those muscles that is required to bring your foot into the dome shape. I'll be honest. I can't say I've invested a lot of time. Oops, pardon I just brushed my microphone. Doming my feet, but I think the logic makes sense to me, and there's a little bit of data suggesting that this could be a useful thing to do, especially, I guess, that with all this sort of stuff, the injury prevention stuff, the exercise advice, do this, do that, try this. The underlying principle for me is, if you're happy and life is ticking along fine for you, don't feel that, by God, you need to get out there and start foot doming. This is it. I mean, there's an argument to be made for prevention, and maybe it's a useful preventative thing to do, but I tend to be a little bit more reactive. And it's like, if you're finding that what you're getting injured repeatedly, or you're not comfortable or whatever, or you're losing form late in the race or whatever, then that's something you might try. In the same way that I would say, if you're running in big shoes and you can't stay healthy, try running in small shoes, more minimalist shoes. And if you're running in minimalist shoes and can't stay, try running in big shoes. It's not that I necessarily think there's ironclad evidence that one is superior to the other. It's like, we've all got to find a way, an approach that works for us and allows us to do the things we want to do. And beyond that, it doesn't matter if there's some hypothetical perfect way of doing things, because I don't think we've had much luck in identifying that.
But runners, Alex. Runners will hear one thing, totally miss the entire story, and zoom in on the one thing. And you mentioned it. So if you are going to transition to a minimalist shoe or a barefoot transition, that doesn't mean, hey, I'll put on a Merrill barefoot shoes and I'm going to go run an easy 10K. No. Like, it's go run an easy 100 meters.
Yeah.
But
think in terms of 6 months or a year or 2 years to make the transition, not in terms of 6 runs or 6 weeks even.
And there was a great advertisement probably back 5 years ago that Ultra had, and it was like a shoe or a foot with a 6-pack. And, it was kind of like,
there we go. The foot core. Like I'm telling you.
The foot core.
Yeah.
It was a great advertisement on it.
There's absolutely, like, look, there's no doubt that you're going to develop the muscles in your feet more if you do exercises for the feet, like foot doming, and if you run in a shoe that doesn't do as much for your foot automatically. But people are coming from different places, have different bodies and different starting points, and so it's a matter of figuring out what you need at any given point and what your goals are.
I'm just thinking of the next commercial could be just Todd's foot opening up a beet juice jar with,
with sodium bicarbonate.
If you've got prehensile toes, if you can open the beet juice with your toes, you're ready to
you're on the right track.
You know you're in business. Alex, like, have you last time you were on, you told us you're a Saucony, you like Saucony shoes, right? I believe you're still
I have some Saucony shoes going, yeah, but I'm pretty promiscuous with the shoes. I tend to keep this
covering a lot of ground.
It's covering a lot of ground.
Yeah, well, with the shoes,
with the shoes, of course. It's a running podcast.
Yeah.
Right.
I have probably 4 shoes on the go right now, and I like to have.
Do you have the super shoes? Have you tried the super shoes yet?
Back in 2017, I got a review pair of the Nike Vaporflies, the original, the OG, 4%. I think I still have them somewhere. I've run in them probably a dozen times, so I know what it's like to run in super shoes. I have I think it's a Saucony shoe that doesn't have a carbon fiber plate, but it maybe has like a plastic, a nylon plate in it or something like that. So it has the geometry, but not the sort of magic performance properties. And I find that's quite comfortable for tempo runs. So I've tried them, but I haven't pursued them for performance purposes, and I haven't invested $400 in them. Whatever.
They
are going right now. Wow.
Yeah, some of them. Yeah, those are the cheap ones. If you want to run 209 for the women's marathon or whatever, it's more than that. They've got some like $500 shoes.
Wow. And one thing I saw, like I've tried a couple super shoes over the years, mainly the Ultra Vanish Carbons and the Carbon ones. And I find that if you got a strong foot and you got an active foot and active big toe, then you put the super shoes on, it's even better. So if you're always running these build type shoes and you have, like I call dead feet, and then you say, I'm going to put this super shoe on and it's going to perform the function. It's like, no, like you still need an active foot. So you can be double the bonus if you have strong feet, and maybe invest if you can save up and buy a pair of super shoes if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. And I mean, my take is there's not much doubt anymore that the shoes work, like that they provide a real performance benefit. But it's a much more open question as to, okay, what happens if you do all your running in these kinds of shoes? What's lost in the long term? I think there are some things gained. You might be, because you can run faster. You can maybe push yourself a little harder and recover a little quicker in workouts. But in the long run, are you going to be losing strength and resilience? Is the best combination to do like a lot of the East African runners do, which is to grow up bare feet, have super strong feet, and then to pull on a pair of super shoes and go out and set the world on fire.
Well, and you mentioned it. So Chicago Marathon last weekend, Ruth Kipchikny, I think is her name, probably butchered it. Sorry, Ruth, if you're listening. We'll get you on the podcast in the future. But what an amazing time. She lowered the women's record by, was it almost 3 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, she became the previous world record was 2:11 high, and it was almost 2 minutes. She went 2:09.56, so became the first woman to break 2:10. And that obviously has some resonance for Canadian runners of a certain age, like my age, who watched this long sort of 40-something year process of the Canadian men trying to break 2:10 for the first time, which finally happened, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. So to see a woman break 2:10, I mean, it's hard to put words to how unprecedented that is, and how unexpected it would be to see someone run that fast.
And I saw that, like the unexpected. They were showing her progression, and how quick her progression was, and how chunky her progression was. And then the pundits maybe would not have thought that a sub 2:10 was possible when you look at her previous races. But maybe we'll find out in time, is it a stack of all these little 1% betters, the shoes, the fueling,
Beet juice.
The beet juice, sodium bicarbonate, who she is, her training regimen that made this happen on a super fast course. Chicago was a beautiful course, nice and flat, great weather.
Yeah, and look, not to be that guy, but I will say performance-enhancing drugs are also a possibility. I know there's no specific reason to suspect her other than that this time is so unbelievably fast. But there's all, as you said, there's all these other things that are out there these days. The baking soda, the shoes that continue to get better. Each time we think it's like the shoes have settled into, okay, now we know what a shoe can do. Companies are still trying to innovate and potentially still finding ways of squeezing out a little bit. And, like 1% over the course of a marathon, that's close to a minute. So yeah, it's one thing that I thought was interesting about Chepngetich, and I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name either, but I'll go with that. She has a history of fast runs, nothing that would have indicated a 209, but fast runs. But one thing that's distinctive about her history is that she has a history of basically kamikaze pacing. The gun goes and she goes out like a bat out of hell, goes through halfway in a ridiculous fast split, and then in the past has paid the price. And so she ran, I can't remember, maybe 2:14 or something like that, narrowly missed the world record a few years ago in Chicago after going out in 1:05, which is for the first half, which is more or less 2:10 pace. So, and that's very unusual. Most marathoners are very measured in their approach in terms of thinking, I think I can run this fast, therefore I'll go out at, a little slower than that at the halfway mark. So if anyone was going to have an off the charts breakthrough, something that was totally unexpected, you might put your money on someone who seems to run without fear, goes out really fast, generally then blows up and slows down in the second half, but eventually catches everything is, all her horoscopes came up the right direction on that particular day. She was feeling great and was able to hang in there and nail an amazing race. So you can't have a breakthrough performance like that by being conservative in the first half. And if you're a pro marathoner who gets to run two races a year, and that's the source of your yearly income, you tend to be conservative. You tend to be risk averse and just trying to run a really good marathon, but not lay yourself out there in the way that she has in past races. So that was something I thought was interesting. And, she ran something like the fifth fastest half marathon in history and then kept going for another half and didn't really slow down. So that took a lot of guts.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I take away from it too. And when we have other guests on, they touch on that for racing. If you're there to race, bet on yourself. Bet on yourself. Put yourself out there. But if you're there just to finish and experience, then be more conservative. But isn't that kind of true in life? If you can put yourself out there, sometimes you might end up somewhere a lot different spot than you plan to be, and it may be in a good spot by putting yourself out there and trusting yourself a little bit.
And it may be a bad spot. You have to you have to decide your risk reward tolerance, and that that's tricky. Like if I was saying with pro marathoners doing 2 a year, like it going for something great often means accepting the risk that you're going to of complete failure, right? And maybe that's something that people, all of us need to think about carefully and sort of say, maybe it's okay if I have a few complete failures, because that's what it takes to put myself in a position for big success. It's hard to do though. Like I can say, you put in a long training block, you're like, I don't want to give myself a 40% chance of failure in exchange for a 10% chance of amazing success. I'd rather take somewhere in the smooth, like the sweet spot of the distribution. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but it's something you need to think through as when you're setting your pace goals.
Absolutely. It's kind of like the podcast, Mark and I went out like a bandit right out of the gate.
Bad at hell.
we got to mile 20 so far, and
still a long way to go. If you're running a 100 miler, mile 20 is nothing.
Exactly. I love it.
That's great. So, Alex, we've absolutely enjoyed our time with us. Just as we get to a close, just wanted to ask you, what do you have on the go coming up? Are you any races that you're looking forward to? Any articles? I think you have a few things.
The book's coming up soon.
Yeah, thanks for teeing up that question. Well,
what can you
I'll
tell
answer
us?
the first part of the question, which is that I'm going to run some cross country this fall. Reaching out for some wood to touch. Health permitting. Last year, I pulled a hamstring the week before the National Cross Country Championships, but I'll run some Masters cross country races, which is a lot of fun for me. And I like training in a group. I've got a good group of teammates, and so I enjoy that process. And yeah, I've got a book coming out in March 25th. The book is called The Explorer's Gene: Why We Seek Big Challenges, New Flavors, and the Blank Spots on the Map. So
That's cool.
Yeah, it's kind of it's not specifically about running, but it's definitely running adjacent in terms of thinking about why do we set off to do things, crazy things like running ultramarathons. What are we trying to discover about ourselves, and what do we get out of it, and why are we drawn to these things? So that's going to be over the next 5-6 months. I'll be gearing up for that book release.
It must be hard to wait in anticipation of it finally being released after all that work that's gone into writing and editing and getting it produced, right? So
yeah, I mean, I just actually I'll lean over here. I
just happen to have one.
I just yesterday received the
nice.
These are the advanced. I'll flash it there very quickly as a tease. But those are the galleys that will be sent out to reviewers and stuff. And so it's like, hold on, I'm holding it out in my hand. Why don't we just start selling it? Like, what are we waiting for? It's like, March. Let's get on here.
Come on.
But it's a long process, and
absolutely,
I'm not the master of that process. So I just
exciting,
go along for the ride.
Exciting process,
and it's not your first rodeo either, right? So
it's not, but yeah, every rodeo is equally terrifying. So we'll see if I can stay on the horse for a little while this time.
Awesome. Well, again, just we wish you all the luck with your cross country coming up and the book release, and we really appreciate your time.
And he helps us break down the science into terms that everyday runners can understand.
Well, thanks, Mark, and thanks, Todd. I appreciate you having me on, and I hope you have beets for dinner tonight.